The price of being America's ally. Europe drained, Middle East under fire, Asia bracing for the storm. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Global Perspective. The cost of alliance has never been clearer than it is today. From Europe to the Middle East, and now spreading toward Asia, a geopolitical fracture line is taking shape, driven by a cold and consistent rule. The closer a nation moves under Washington's security umbrella, the shorter its distance to war. What was once marketed as protection is now revealing a harsher reality, a mechanism that pulls nations into conflict, redistributes risk, and pushes consequences outward toward the periphery of power. In Europe, bombs may not be falling, but the economy is being eroded layer by layer. Capital flows, energy supplies, and industrial capacity are being drained in a game they do not control. Meanwhile, the Middle East absorbs the hottest flames of war. Military bases built under the banner of defense are becoming priority targets for retaliation, turning host nations into frontlines overnight. And now, Asia is emerging as the next destination of the storm. Alliances are tightening, bases are expanding, and military routes are being mapped in advance. The same script appears to be repeating, on a much larger scale. The question is no longer who is protected, but who becomes the next target. America's security umbrella, not a shield, but a lightning rod. A harsh truth is shaking the geopolitical chessboard. The so-called U.S. security umbrella is not a shield, it is a massive lightning rod, attracting fire from all directions. The polished image built over decades is shattering, exposing a cold operational mechanism beneath. Those standing under it are not protected, they are exposed. The closer a nation moves, the higher the risk. The more it opens itself to military bases, the deeper it places itself into the eye of the storm. In the Middle East, this rule is written in fire. Bases built for protection have become primary targets. When Iran retaliates, strikes do not land on American soil, they hit U.S. positions on Allied territory. Airspace is used, land is leveraged, but the consequences remain local. Peaceful cities turn into frontlines overnight. The umbrella does not block strikes, it redirects them. In Europe, war takes a different form, but the essence remains. Financial lifelines are drained, weapons are sold, energy is repriced, and supply chains are strangled. Under Donald Trump, alliances became transactional, profit-driven calculations. Those who pay do not control. Those who bear the burden do not set the pace. A closed loop emerges. One side enjoys safety, the other is slowly exhausted. And now, Asia stands at a crossroads, whether to remain tied to this structure or step away from an increasingly volatile orbit. The lessons from Europe and the Middle East are clear. Military bases are not just symbols of strength, they are coordinates for targeting. Alliances are not just protection, they can become invitations to conflict. The Middle East awakens, from shield to target. A geopolitical shock has hit the Middle East. Nations that once trusted Washington's protection now find themselves on the front lines of retaliation. Military bases once praised as safeguards are now magnets for missiles. Geography keeps the U.S. mainland out of direct reach, but war follows the nearest visible presence. That means bases in Allied territories. Airspace becomes operational corridors. Ports, runways, and fuel depots become links in a war machine far larger than national interests. When retaliation comes, defense systems can only intercept part of the firepower. The rest lands, on cities, on homes, on lives. War ceases to be strategy. It becomes human tragedy. The deeper paradox is this: nations that believed they were protected are instead pushed forward as buffers. Strikes don't hit the center of power, they hit the surrounding ring. And in war, the shield always breaks first. Qatar's shift. A crack in America's Gulf stronghold. A major crack has appeared, and its name is Qatar. As Doha begins distancing itself from U.S. military presence, this is no longer a diplomatic gesture, it is strategic awakening. For years, Gulf nations believed hosting U.S. bases kept war away. Reality has rewritten that rule. Bases are not shields, they are targets. When conflict erupts, weapons systems lock onto U.S. positions. Host nations instantly become frontlines. Qatar now sees this clearly. Its shift could destabilize the entire forward defense architecture the U.S. has built over decades. One link breaks, the entire chain begins to shake. Europe, the ATM of proxy war. Europe's financial machine is running, but not for itself. It is fueling a war beyond its control, while the command center remains in Washington. Energy costs soar. Factories shut down. Inflation rises. This is silent attrition, no bombs, but economic foundations are hollowed out. The roles are brutally clear. America leads strategy from a safe distance. Europe funds the war and absorbs the consequences. Weapons are sold at high prices. Capital flows back across the Atlantic. Under Trump, war became increasingly commercialized. Allies became forced buyers in a market controlled by their own partner. With cheap Russian energy cut off, Europe trapped itself, forced to buy expensive alternatives, often from the US. This is not just a supply shift, it is a transfer of economic power. Industries shrink, businesses relocate, competitiveness fades, dependency rises, and with it, the loss of independent decision making. Europe faces a paradox. It joined an alliance for security, but pays with economic sovereignty. NATO, from defense alliance to paid protection model. NATO, once hailed as a defensive shield, is revealing a more transactional nature. Power is centralized in Washington. Costs and risks are distributed among members. Under Trump, security commitments turned into financial obligations. Compliance is rewarded. Hesitation brings pressure. Security becomes leverage. When conflict erupts, the US commands from afar. Europe pays, and suffers the consequences. Threats are maintained at just the right level to keep allies dependent. From Tehran's perspective, this is not an alliance, it is a system of controlled pressure. Asia, the next frontline. The storm hasn't arrived, but its path is already drawn. Asia Pacific is no longer just an economic hub, it is becoming the decisive battlefield of the 21st century. Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, no longer just partners, but frontline positions. If conflict erupts, geography protects the US, but not its allies. Bases along the island chain become immediate targets. Airfields shut down. Ports collapse. Infrastructure fails within hours. And because Asia is the world's manufacturing hub, the impact would be global. Supply chains break. Markets collapse. Economies shake. War here would not stay regional, it would become global. War is a system, the end of true alliances. Modern war is no longer direct confrontation, it is managed remotely. The command center stays safe. The battlefield is outsourced. Allies become staging grounds, deployment zones, and targets. Missiles don't hit power centers, they hit partner territories. Economic crises don't stay local, they spread through dependent economies. This is not alliance, it is structured risk transfer. Fear becomes fuel, and alliances transform from shared security into contractual obligations. Europe pushes back. Trump slows down. At the height of rising tensions with Iran, Europe delivered a cold response. This is not our war. Short, sharp, and powerful enough to disrupt Washington's momentum. Europe chose economic stability over escalation. Iran understands this weakness well, leveraging control over strategic choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. Military decisions now carry economic consequences. Trump aimed to escalate, but allies stepped back. Leadership from Washington is now being tested. Trump faces isolation within his own alliance. The Western bloc is showing cracks. Trump's criticism of NATO alienated allies. Europe responded pragmatically, keeping distance from conflict. They prioritized energy costs, social stability, and economic survival. The result: a global strategy becomes a solo act. Power remains, but influence weakens. Hormuz, the world's choke point. The Strait of Hormuz is now the most critical artery of the global economy. Millions of barrels of oil pass through daily. Any disruption sends shockwaves worldwide. Iran doesn't need loud displays of power, just control over the flow. That alone forces global powers to calculate every move. Iran holds the decisive card. While Washington projects military strength, Iran plays a quieter, but more effective, game. Control the choke point, control the tempo. Open the route, markets stabilize. Tighten it, oil prices surge. This gives Iran strategic leverage over the global economy. Military power alone is no longer decisive. Geography has become Iran's greatest weapon. And in this game, Tehran controls the rhythm.